Hey Mustangs, in this video we're going to be taking a look at virus reproduction. If you're going to understand how viruses make you sick, you have to understand virus reproduction. So, first looking at viruses, we know that there's no growth. Viruses don't grow. Once they've been assembled, that's it. That's their specs, that's what they're going to remain. Okay, so viruses don't grow. They can't make proteins by themselves in order to grow. Okay? We also know that there's no energy required. Viruses don't have to eat to stay alive, so they don't require any energy either. And when it comes to reproduction, they must infect a host cell. A virus by itself will always be one single virus by itself because it needs a host cell. It needs to trick a host cell into making more viruses for it. Okay. Now, I need to step back just a second and talk about what a host cell is, only because I've had students in the past be confused about this. A host cell isn't a certain type of cell. When we say host cell, we mean any cell that the virus can infect. So just like we saw before, like the influenza virus, for example, its host cells in the human body are usually the nasal cells and the lung cells. Okay, so we would call the nasal and the lung cells host cells to the influenza virus. Okay, so that is what what a host cell actually is. Now, with the new coronavirus that's going around, same thing. So with the coronavirus, they have their specific cells that they can infect too, that they consider their host cells as well. So with the coronavirus, you're looking at nasal cells, throat cells, lung cells, and it's even believed that they can infect the kidney cells as well. So multiple host cells for the new coronavirus that's going around. Now here we have the 5 most simplified basic steps to virus reproduction. And this applies to some but not all viruses. But if you can understand this, you understand most of virus reproduction. Okay? So first step, the virus uses its protein receptors like a key to identify its host cells. So that's what it has to do first. Identify the host cell using those protein receptors. So the protein receptor on the surface of the virus is like the key. The matching protein receptor on the surface of the host cell is like the lock. So they go together, lock and key. So step 1, identify the virus. The virus identifies its host cell using its protein receptors. Step 2 and step 3, it's kind of blurred. It depends on what type of virus you're looking at. So once it's identified its host cell, then it's either going to enter the host cell or inject its DNA or RNA. In any case, the virus's DNA or RNA gets put into the host cell. And once that occurs, the host cell reads the instructions. The host cell reads the DNA or RNA and then starts putting together and making more viruses for the virus. So your cell, your own personal cells, actually start building viruses for the virus. And I've had students ask me, why do they do that? They don't know better. They receive DNA, RNA instructions, and they just read those instructions. Okay? So once again, identify the host cell using the protein receptors, insert DNA or RNA or enter the cell. The host cell reads the instructions, starts making more viruses. Eventually, the cell gets destroyed. Okay, so that's what we see here. So we see the most important part. Here is the virus identifying its host cell by matching its receptors to the protein receptors on the surface of the cell, like a lock and key, and then it's able to either enter the cell as a result of this or inject its DNA or RNA. Now, the virus that has been studied the most is called a bacteriophage. It's a type of virus that can only infect certain types of bacteria, and we learned a lot about virus reproduction from it, but not all viruses reproduce exactly the same way. And remember, the only thing I guess that we could say that all viruses have in common is that they all require a host cell. They all require a host cell to trick into making more viruses for it. Okay? So looking at bacteriophages, there's some that do the Lytic cycle, where it's basically the 5 steps that we just saw. So identify the host cell using protein receptors, insert DNA, RNA, or enter the cell. The cell makes more viruses, then the cell is destroyed. That's the Lytic cycle. Okay, so that's what we see happening here. So we see identify the host cell, inserts the RNA or DNA, and then the cell makes more viruses till the cell is eventually destroyed. Then there's the lysogenic cycle. The lysogenic cycle is a little bit more devious. So the cell is identified by the virus using its protein receptors. It enters or inserts its DNA or RNA, but then the DNA or RNA becomes incorporated into part of the cell. That cell then divides, and now you have 2 cells with virus instructions in it. Then those divide, now you have 4, then you have 8. So you wind up making a ton of cells that have viruses in them, and then all of a sudden the instructions get turned on, and it actually turns into the light tick cycle after that point. So eventually the cells will be destroyed as a result. Okay, so here we actually can see a really good graphic from the amoeba sisters. So here we see the viruses infecting. Right away, the cells make the viruses in the light tick cycle, but in the lysogenic, they don't. Cells reproduce, and then all of them have the instructions, and eventually, like I said, turns into the light tick cycle. So that's what we actually see here. So light tick cycle leads directly to making viruses and destroying it, whereas the lysogenic, it lays dormant until eventually the instructions get turned on, and you have a whole bunch of cells that turn on at the same time, and lots of viruses made and destroy cells. In animal cells, again, very similar to what we saw in bacteriophages. In animal cells, we see a virus identify its host cell using its protein receptors, entering or inserting its DNA or RNA, and tricking the host cell into making more viruses. But in the case of many animal viruses and how they reproduce, the animal cell basically becomes a virus-making factory. So the animal cell just keeps on making viruses, keeps pumping these out. And these viruses, as they're getting released, they go and they infect surrounding cells and turn those into virus-making factories. Okay? And the reason why this is so devious, why viruses are more deadly than bacteria, is because they're basically hiding out inside of the cells. Okay? They're hidden. The immune system can't get to them right away. Now, the cool thing about the way viruses reproduce here that our immune system has actually adapted to is this. When a virus has been infected by a cell, as it's making the parts of the virus, some of those parts actually get stuck in the cell membrane of that cell, and that allows certain cells of the immune system to identify that that cell's been infected. The most important ones are cytotoxic T cells. These cytotoxic T cells, they are specifically made, they're designed to hunt down cells in the body that have been infected by specific viruses and destroy those cells. These cytotoxic T cells, they are you. They are cells that your body makes. And it's their job to hunt down and destroy other cells in your body that have been infected. Because if they can destroy those cells, they're destroying the virus factories. So that's what these cytotoxic T cells do. And the way they identify those cells is by those parts, those protein receptors that are part of a virus that they see sticking up on the outside of the cell. Okay? Now, with the new coronavirus going around, these cytotoxic T cells that are normally the champions of the immune system here, that help identify and destroy these virus factories, they mess up. Not in everybody, but in the people who wind up unfortunately dying because of the new coronavirus, these cytotoxic T cells, instead of destroying the cells that are making the viruses only, they start destroying healthy cells too. So they kind of go overboard, go a little bit crazy, and destroy healthy cells. So that's healthy cells in your nose, in your throat, and in your lungs. That's the worst place for this to be happening. So it destroys those cells, and it makes it difficult to breathe. That's why people who get really sick with the new coronavirus wind up needing a respirator to breathe for them, because their lung cells are getting so damaged, not just by the virus itself, but also by their own immune system that is destroying not just the infected cells, but healthy cells as well.